A BBC neutrality row has broken out at Glastonbury, where Countryfile and BBC Radio 4 presenter Anita Rani enthusiastically agreed with a guest on stage who ranted about, and I quote, a shit 14 years of Tory rule, with the Conservatives having, quote, taken the heart out of the country and squeezed it. Now, this doesn't strike me as crime of the century. Many would agree with those words. But it puts paid to any idea that the stars on the BBC, who are remunerated off the back of an obligatory tax that old ladies face jail for not paying, is in any way politically neutral. Meanwhile, this supposedly kind and inclusive festival has seen the waving of Palestinian flags, which, given the current war in Gaza, some consider to be offensive to Jews and offering support to terrorists. Did these revellers forget that the horrific attacks on October the 7th focused on a similar type of music festival to theirs, where hundreds of peace-loving people, young people, girls and boys like them, were mown down in a hail of bullets? The others, who were there to sing and dance and have a good time, were raped, stabbed, burned, strangled, or taken as hostages. But yeah, Israel bad. From the river to the sea, man. Well, it's Glastonbury, so from the river to the mud. And in extraordinary scenes last night, revellers celebrated migrants in dinghies illegally breaking into the UK, which some could consider to be a celebration of death, given the terrible drownings that we've seen. If you're watching the show right now, there's a band playing and a packed crowd are passing around a huge fake dinghy with mocked-up asylum seekers on board. A bit ironic, therefore, that the festival that these misguided do-gooders are attending is itself protected by a 13-foot-high, 4.5-mile-long reinforced metal fence, which is impregnable. You can't even dig a tunnel. Bad news for Hamas, who are probably headlining the pyramid stage. This extraordinary construction is the kind of border wall that even Donald Trump would consider excessive. For all of their support for lawbreakers in the Channel, not a single person is able to enter the Glastonbury Festival without the correct accreditation, without the organisers knowing exactly who's coming in and that they have a right to be there. Imagine if the country was like that. We can but dream. Glastonbury is an annual ultra-woke pilgrimage in which the whole of North London descends on Somerset for 5 days of double vodkas and double standards. It's held up as an example of a communal way of life and the rejection of capitalism and inequality. Except it is an oversubscribed commercial event with big-name corporate sponsors on board. The cost of a ticket to this experiment in communism is £355, plus a £5 booking fee. Doesn't sound very egalitarian to me. The shows are fronted by millionaire headliners who fly around the globe on a private jet. And those considering buying a couple of pints at the beer tent and a vegan sausage roll may need to consider taking out a second mortgage to feed themselves at this anti-capitalist party. I say mortgage because the bulk of this crowd are crushingly middle class. And in spite of the strong eco-message underpinning the whole affair, every few years the organisers have to take a year off, a so-called fallow year, so that the depleted fields can begin to recover from 5 days of drunken wokery. The impact on this natural environment is nothing short of devastating, with mountains of litter and thousands of plastic tents left behind by the socially conscious partygoers who, don't forget, have spent 5 days hoovering up more than just lukewarm Carlsberg lager. It is, after all, a festival of drug use. The illegal narcotics that these woke numpties shove up their nose, in their arm and up their backside bankroll international drug cartels, feed crime, destroy communities and lead to devastated lives. Oh, and death. But these are the good people, folks. Do keep up. Now, full disclosure, I've performed at Glastonbury several times and I had a great time. The people involved in running it are a delight. It is a world-famous event, a great British success story, and long may it continue. There's a lot of volunteering and good causes are supported. But please don't tell me this is a socialist utopia. The Glastonbury Festival is more capitalist than a high street bank. You pay an arm and a leg to get in, and its borders are better protected than any nation. Glastonbury is a festival of not just music, but of wild hypocrisy. So, a mock-up of a dinghy was passed around the crowd last night at Glastonbury, supposedly making a comment about illegal immigration. It is illegal. People die in the channel. But these woke, virtue-signalling music revellers seem to think it's a ruse to make such a mockery of what is essentially a terrible crime, and which is leading to an economic, humanitarian and national security disaster. Let's get the views now of my top pundits. I'm delighted to have political commentator Benedict Spence, journalist and model Diana Moran, and anarchist and academic Dr. Lisa Mackenzie. Dr. Lisa, what a load of hypocrites.
I agree. I hate Glastonbury. I have hated it all my life. It's just a white, middle-class smug fest. I used to live in East London, and it was great this weekend because you see less hipsters everywhere, and it was absolutely obvious where they were. So I have no love for this thing at all. I hate it. And also the idols that were the band while they were throwing around apparently Banksy made the dinghy. Though that's the sort of talk on Twitter. The Idols, Posh Boys, had an album cover of them standing outside a council estate once. So I have no nice things to say about Glastonbury, the white middle class that sort of flock to it, the hipsters and the hypocrites who play there. Is that clear?
Well, it is. Listen, let me be very clear that I do think Glastonbury is an amazing event. It's a world-class spectacle. Elton John was incredible last year as the headliner. I thought it was one of the gigs of his career. I'm very proud of Glastonbury, just like Wimbledon, just like the FA Cup final, you name it. You know, I think it's a great, great event. But I think the hypocrisy is spellbinding. Diana Moran, your reaction to this dinghy, which is mocking the devastating cost of human life in people crossing the Channel at a music festival?
I think that's absolutely hideous. It's totally wrong. But I loved Glastonbury. I'm a Somerset born and bred person from just up the road from there. And at the beginning, it was a wonderful thing. But exactly as you've said, Mark, it's been taken over, capitalist, all these drug users going in and out as well. It's just become the most awful shambles. Such a shame.
Indeed, Benedict, the irony is lost on these revellers that whilst they talk about equality and they reject capitalism, they're spending 10 quid on a pint of lager. The ticket to the event is approaching £400, and they want open borders, presumably, except there's an enormous 4.5-mile fence that surrounds Glastonbury itself.
Oh, of course, and with any luck, they'll keep the fence up and all of these people can stay there for a lot longer so that actually we can all enjoy East London for a lot longer. I don't know what it is that they are trying to say with this dinghy. I was sort of under the impression that we're told that people who cross the sea in these boats are at great risk, at great peril from some disaster beneath, and presumably that means, you know, the metaphor here is that Glastonbury, you know, people attending Glastonbury are, if anything, the danger to these people because, you know, that's what they're sort of floating on. It's one of those things, though, isn't it, where, you know, we are actually quite good, as you say, at creating these sort of cultural institutions, these cultural moments. Many of them originally organic, things like the FA Cup final. Actually, you know, football is something that has sort of grown up from a community sport. Glastonbury is was not created as some sort of commercial vehicle.
Not at all.
But all of these things do inevitably become capitalist machines, and very good ones. It must be said, they're very good at turning a profit. If they weren't, they wouldn't survive for very long. And, you know, there is a shame to that. But ultimately, also, these things need to survive and become viable in some way. So, you know, as you say, there is a certain irony to people sort of going to these things and saying, you know, down with capitalism or whatever it might be. But ultimately, that is what has built Britain. And many of these people who are there, they profit from that as much as anybody
OK,
else.
Briefly, Diana Moran, aren't these youngsters and the people at Glastonbury showing empathy for people fleeing for their lives across the Channel?
Not at all. I think it's just awful. I mean, I know we're a democracy and we're allowed to say what we want to say without, you know, getting picked up and put into jail. But I think this is totally wrong. This isn't helping the cause of the cause and the reality of the immigrants and the crossing.
It's cosplaying. I think it's actually.
What do you mean by cosplay?
Well, Marie Antoinette, the Queen of France, who was toppled by the revolution, had a pretend farm in the Palace of Versailles, and her friends used to pretend to be farm women, and they were in this pretend farm, and I think that's what Glastonbury is. I think it's this sort of pretend protest space. I think it started out as a genuine free festival, and now what it is, it's a load of sort of rich kids cosplaying, being sort of radicals.
Okay. Well, fair enough. A socialist utopia it ain't, for sure.